If Dante Moore is so clearly the starter, what are they waiting for?
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, and thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, top questions in spring practice, who's going to be surprised on both sides of the ball, all in today's show, which features Erik Skopil, 24/7 Sports and the Autzen Audibles podcast back here to discuss. So, Erik, I understand that it is difficult for you guys with boots on the ground to actually see a quarterback battle that may or may not actually exist. But the sentiment I get a lot from Oregon fans is, oh, it's going to be Dante Moore. It's going to be, and that's my suspicion as well. I think I'm more like 85% and they're 99 to 100% confident. But if that's the case, what do you think the staff is waiting for? If there's such a big gap between the two, why do you think we haven't heard who the starting quarterback is yet?
Great to be back, Spencer. Thanks for the intro. Thanks for pimping out the show I'm on. I think that's a great question. And my answer is that's just how these guys handle competition, I think, at the end of the day here. And I think that's been something we've seen. I remember we didn't get confirmation until basically in Dallas in 2022 for if Bo Nix was the quarterback over Ty Thompson. And we kind of all knew. It was similar to this, where it was like they brought this guy in and he was clearly going to be the guy, but there was no indication from them. They wouldn't say anything about it. And I just think that's how this program works, is they want to keep that dangle of competition in front of Austin for as long as possible, keep that maybe to improve Dante, to just kind of keep the room in some sort of upward trajectory by dangling a little carrot of competition. I guarantee behind the scenes, Dante has a real good sense of where he's at, and Austin has a really good sense of where he's at. We just in the public aren't getting those sorts of comments, and I think I'm okay with it. I think I'd love to hear Dan or Will or somebody come out and say Dante looks really damn good, though. I think that's maybe what's missing for me a little bit is like, and that's not exclusively a Dante thing with this staff. That is, Dan just doesn't like to talk about his players. Period, especially separating one from another. So personally, I would love to hear Dante looks incredible, guys. He was so good last year. Like, he was really pushing Dylan behind the scenes. All the stuff you're hearing from people behind this, what you're hearing from sources, and et cetera, as opposed to what he's saying in front of a microphone. So long-winded way of saying, I just don't think that's how they operate. I don't think that's how they operate really at any position. And maybe the answer is it's closer than we think. Maybe the answer is Dante's running away with it and they don't want to say anything until we get to August 31st. So and to the question that's on here on today's show, when will a starting quarterback be announced? Probably August 31st.
Yeah, it could. Maybe August 30th. If they're feeling loose and wild, they'll announce it that early. I saw this great comment the other day. I was watching the press availability for Drew Maringer, the tight ends coach, and someone commented in a 17-minute appearance that they just heard more from the tight ends coach in one appearance than they've heard from Dan Lanning all year. And I mean, it's just kind of how, to your point, like, this is what Lanning has done pretty consistently for the last couple of years. Because you mentioned 2022. You look back now, that was Ty Thompson's second season with Oregon, and you look back at where those two careers have gone, that one wasn't even close. Not in this. Bo Nix is a starting NFL quarterback. Ty Thompson is a tight end at Tulane. Wish him all the best. Unfortunately, it did not work out. I think he got dealt a tough hand, but he didn't have the it factor that you're looking for at quarterback. That much has been made pretty clear. So I think if they're not going to say anything back there, or at least they didn't back then when there was that big of a gap, there could be that big of a gap. And I think that kind of leaves Oregon fans in, I don't know if you call it a frustrating position, just kind of this limbo spot like an Inception where you're like, hey, you don't really know what you're doing here, right? It's like Dante could be great. Novosad could be pushing him. It could be kind of close. It's Schrodinger's cat. You're not going to know till you open the box, but the staff isn't going to open that box until you said probably August would be my guess.
Yeah, and I guess we'll see. I guess the other thing I'd point out is we do have one data point that's public, and that's the spring game, April 26th. If it's really obvious there, I wonder if we can finagle through the couple of difficult, or I guess I should say well-formed questions, like what's really going on? Like if Dante just absolutely dominates, and let's say Autzen has a poor day by his standards, or maybe it's just his normal day, but it's clear there's a lot of separation. At a certain point, you can't just tell people what you've seen with your eyes isn't accurate, right? Like you can try to say that. People will obviously have an idea of where it's at. So I guess that would be my one caveat on my probably August is where we're going to find is like if in the spring game, it's like, holy cow, Dante Moore has a Marcus Mariota. Remember that spring game he had?
Oh yeah. I remember that. I remember he broke the 75-yard touchdown run or something like that. And he just kind of accelerated through, and we all watched him and went, whoa. Like, Darren Thomas and Jeremiah Masoli could run, but what the heck is that guy?
Yeah, and so maybe it won't be probably the running that stands out, but maybe if it's like, oh my gosh, Dante just threaded the needle for 3 really impressive touchdown passes or whatever. His understanding of this offense and how he performs in it is just excellent. And like this looked as good as it's looked with Bo Nix or Dylan Gabriel at the helm. I know it's a spring game, so we probably shouldn't say that. But like if we come away being like he just completed 80% of his passes, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, everything looked clean. Maybe we have a different conversation with Dan and Will post spring game. But my sense is what I said earlier is how it's going to play out. We're waiting until August and we'll just see on game day.
Yeah, I think the one solid data point for these two guys that we do have as people not directly inside the program right now is last year's spring game. And if you go back and watch those guys, Autzen Novosad was my biggest surprise player. He was the biggest story, I think, coming out of that game. You know, Dante Moore looked kind of like I expect Dante Moore to, but I watched Novosad, aside from what he made, I think one throw that wasn't super accurate, and then a bad decision on the interception where he forced the ball into double coverage. Yeah. Aside from that, he was going throw for throw, pinpoint accuracy with a number of different styles of throws. He was layering the ball over the top. He was throwing a back shoulder. He was darting it over the middle. I mean, he showed the full repertoire, and I came away from that going, man, I think we're sleeping on this guy. And I've made this point about Novosad before as well. He was not recruited to Oregon as, hey, let's hold you here in case Dante doesn't come back. I don't think the staff could have possibly known they'd have a chance at Dante Moore again. When Dante flipped to UCLA, they recruited Autzen Novosad thinking, hey, this guy could be our starting quarterback one day. Like this is not someone who's a super lowly rated recruit that doesn't have traits and it's just a wild chance. You know, I think of Luke Moga more of as a project, a guy with major upside that might need some more molding at the quarterback position. Novosad, someone who tore it up in high school and in camps and all over the place. So I'd like to see him do well in the spring game, but certainly I expect Dante Moore to be the starter. I just don't think that you can completely write off Novosad as being capable of at least pushing him in spring ball.
And you're right on the recruiting thing. I was just pulling it up here. Novosad is actually the 6th ranked quarterback commit in school history.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
And it's actually a really funny list to look at overall because Dante doesn't count because he signed with UCLA, so he's not technically a signee. Bo doesn't count because he's a transfer. But I was just pulling this up. It's Ty Thompson, number 1.
Wait, hold on. Let me guess this. Joey Harrington has to be in there.
He's not because recruiting rankings were not in this database from when he was around. But
okay,
he may have been if he was included.
Okay, Ty Thompson's in there. Darren Thomas has to be in there. You're joking.
No Darren.
Wow, no Darren Thomas. I thought he was going to be in there. I guess Herbert wasn't that highly rated of a recruit.
Here's a hint.
Oh, Tyler Shuck is in there.
Tyler Shuck is right behind him at 7. Here's a hint. Only 2 of these guys ever started a game at Oregon.
High school recruits. Wow, this is tough trivia time. I mean,
two of them were legit guys. One had an NFL career.
Is Jeff Locke in there?
Boy, is he not. Well, he's on my list, but I'm still scrolling, and he's 23rd.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure recruiting services hadn't completely lost their minds over the years. All right, this is not clicking for me right now. Hit me with it.
All right, number 2, Kellen Clemens. That is a throwback.
Ooh, that was the first quarterback I ever remember watching.
Dennis Dixon, number 3.
Oh, duh.
This one here, should he be on this list or not? Maybe you decide, and I'll send some info back to 24/7. We still got Jaron Chiave, Santa Pulitelli on here who.
Yeah, no. That doesn't.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No.
And then number 5, Travis Johnson, formerly Travis Waller.
Oh wow, I would not have thought of that one. I tell you what, fluid arm motion. Yeah. I could have gassed him up on a segment here on this show if I'd had the chance.
But needless to say, amongst Oregon's quarterback recruiting, this is one of the biggest crown jewels they've had, frankly, to this point. I mean, if you run through those names and you think like 2 of them worked out, one of the guys enrolled for like a week and took off, and then 2 of them very clearly didn't work out. And I think Johnson and Thompson both ended up switching positions and like ultimately, like Johnson ended up playing receiver at like Montana and Montana State. And
I think that is correct, actually.
Yeah, and then you mentioned it with Ty. He's at Tulane. Playing tight end. So. This is to your point. Like this is not someone to totally overlook or discount. And you know, I think the traits we've seen stand out. Like this is a guy who can, whether it's at Oregon or other school, I think be a Power 5 starting quarterback. Like I don't have doubts about that. My doubt is he better than Dante Moore? And my sense is he's probably not. Which I hate to say it for Austin, because is he going to end up using? I don't want to say wasting, but is he end up going to use over half his eligibility at a school that, similar to Ty, he never ends up starting, and that's just the final outcome. And Oregon fans, frankly, are probably okay with that, assuming that whoever does win this job, and most think it's Dante Moore, is what we think he's cut out to be, which is potentially a first-round draft pick at some point.
Yeah, I think it's a really unique dynamic in that I guess not entirely unique. I mean, you had Ty Thompson sitting, but he had guys in front of him who were veteran, experienced quarterbacks. You're like, yeah, you're not gonna start over him. So we'll wait and see on the quarterbacks. But there are, of course, a lot of other guys, 21 other starters, in fact, that are worth discussing. Where are the biggest questions? First, this episode brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands, you'll find exactly what you need, delivered fast from coast to coast. If you need help with an order, Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line and free shipping and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM. Start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. All right, Erik, I want your thoughts on the biggest spring questions for Oregon as practice continues to roll along. I go to one of 2 places. Now, I have a third on the list, but it's not as pressing and I'm not as worried about it. So for me, the biggest question is the secondary. And I know the last impression a lot of Oregon fans have of the secondary is thumbs down and not the Michigan, are you not entertained thumbs down. Like bad thumbs down, it wasn't good. However, I don't care who you've got on the roster, who you bring in via the portal. You lose your top 6 defensive backs. I think this is the biggest single season exodus in the secondary that I can remember, at least since I've been covering the Ducks on the show. I don't think I've ever seen the top 6 go away. So that's my number one question, because I don't know who really 5 of the starters are going to be. I know who it could be. I have an idea. I know that Dylan Thieneman's starting at safety, the Purdue transfer. I know that. That is a 100% guarantee lock. You put that in Sharpie, you're good to go. Outside of that, do you have any 100% guarantees in that unit?
No. I'll expound more. No,
good.
I don't.
I was hoping you might.
Really great guesswork by me. No, I know, and I just we'll start with Dylan. Like, I think he's probably got the highest opinion amongst players we've talked to and coaches. Like, they just rave about him every chance they get, and go out of their way to bring him up. Like at this point in camp, and it's early, a lot of the questions are going to center around like, hey, this guy's new, tell us about him. But there have been several instances where I think Bryce Betcher just went out of his way to be like, yeah, this Dillon kid's really good. He's like everything you want in terms of the total package of behind the scenes, the culture, the IQ, the work ethic. Obviously on field sort of speaks for itself. So I think that you're right. That one is a layup. That's happening. And he's probably going to be the best safety athlete Oregon's had since Javon Holland is kind of that's been my pitch.
That's my expectation. I mean, that's the hope that I have for him. That's the hope.
And probably I don't want to overlook Verone because he ended up the year after Javon left. I think was an All-American. So I'm not going to say he's going to
2021 he was an All-American. Right. 2020 or 2019 the year after Javon left, I think
you're right. That was the 2020 season.
Yeah.
He was all conference, not all. Yeah, right. So either way, I don't want to overlook it and say Dillon's going to be the best safety since X, Y, or Z because Verone left set a really high standard and certainly Javon did and Ugo and all sorts of guys that have been here. But this feels like a guy who can go in and similar to Javon be an NFL guy right away. The rest of the roster, it's who knows? I mean, legitimately, and in a good way, because I just had this stat. I think it's 6 of the 13 highest rated cornerback signees in school history are on this roster. And only 2 of them have played more than 5 snaps. So it's super talented guys. And that's kind of the crux of this whole spring camp. And I think Dan has said it, and Tosh has said it, and Will has said it. Everybody who's come to the podium has basically said it. We know we're super talented. We also know we have very little experience at a lot of places. And this is absolutely one of those. So I wouldn't be surprised if they break fall camp and it's 2 of these true freshmen or redshirt freshmen are in the starting lineup. If Naeem Offord or Finney or Brew or Trey McNutt or, Ife Obadegwu, who I think is someone people overlook,
Lopa,
I've
heard some buzz on Iffy. I've heard buzz on Iffy Obadegwu.
And that's been sort of publicly as well. But it wouldn't surprise me if 2 or 3 of those guys end up breaking camp as a starters. It wouldn't surprise me if it takes a while, but those sort of players end up starters. But it's the interesting thing is that they have at least brought in enough veteran guys from other schools. We mentioned Thieneman, but then there's also Jaden Kennedy. Jaden or Jadon?
Jadon, I believe it's Jadon Kennedy.
Okay, Jadon Kennedy. And then Theron Johnson. You at least give yourself Johnson has a lot of experience as a starting outside corner. Kennedy's played a lot of nickel. Worst case scenario, and it's not worst case, maybe best case scenario is these guys are awesome. But there's a situation where you get one of these guys who, again, doesn't have the same sort of ceiling in terms of NFL draft talent, so maybe not the physical traits, can fill in early. And then you hope by the time you're kind of pushing into postseason play, some of these young guys are ascending. And those are the players that are matching up against Ohio State in a big spot because you did the thumbs down thing. I don't think there's any question about that. If you want to be optimistic and do the thumbs up thing, if you're an Oregon fan, it's none of those guys are going to be on the team this year. And that gives you a totally blank slate. And whether or not that ends up being a good thing or not is one of the big question marks. And your point, probably one of the big questions of camp.
Yeah, I just think that much turnover and so many different options and avenues. I frankly, Eric, want to see a lot of young guys play, but that's also my perspective on the 2025 season, and this is shared by some Oregon fans. It's certainly not shared by some other Oregon fans who I've heard from, and I doubt that Dan Lanning sees it this way. I look at 2025 not as a rebuild, but kind of a soft reset year, and I think their next best chance to win a national title is 2026. I fully expect this team with this schedule to be able to make the playoff. If you gave this team a more brutal schedule, I would probably look at it and say, I hope they make the playoff, but don't expect them to. This schedule, the talent they do have, I expect them to be able to make it because it works in their favor in just so many ways. But I would like it for the secondary to be ready for 2026. I want to see plenty of Naeem Offord or Dakota Fields or Ife Obadegwu or any of those young guys work up your NIL package as best you can to get Thieneman and Mateo to come back for 2026 as well. And that's your next best chance. That's just the way I see it because they lost so much from a year ago. 6 DBs, 2 linebackers, 3 defensive linemen, 4 offensive linemen, a quarterback, and 2 receivers. Sorry, that's just a lot. So that's just the way I look at the secondary and say, I would like to see the young, maybe they're not ready to step onto the field right away, but by the end of the year, I hope we're seeing kind of the next wave of Oregon defensive backs.
Also lost top 2 tight ends and their leading rusher. So
I just overlook. I mean,
And that just kind of solidifies your point, doesn't it, though?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think expectations for 25 should be different from what they were in 23 and 24. Because those were, I know that they, especially 24, there was a ton of portal additions, a ton of newcomers they relied on.
A ton of returners.
Yes, but I was going to say there were also a ton of returners. And in both cases, especially 24 and a lot of 23, that was a veteran group that had kind of had some time together, right? And had kind of come together. That's not the makeup of this team, and that doesn't mean it can't be really good. And I think that's what could make this like a really special season. Because let's say for a second, Spencer, you're right. The schedule is not difficult. Let's say it all does start to gel, and they are able to kind of maneuver their way through with some growing pains. Probably don't beat Penn State early just because that's a tough ask with the way this team is built. I'm not saying they can't, but let's just for a second say that. But let's say they get hot after them. They win 7 straight. And they are competing for Big Ten championship, and they make the playoff, and they make it through a couple of rounds. That's a huge win for this roster, considering all the questions that we have right now. Like, because legitimately, we enter spring, and we're still in spring, halfway through it about, and we don't know the secondary. We really don't know the defensive line. We think the offensive line was addressed really well through the portal with at least experienced players, but we don't know how that's going to go. Like, there's so many questions, and then you come to how good are they going to be at quarterback, right? And like, I just think it's hard for us right now in early April to say expectations for 25 should be similar to what they were preseason around this time for 23 and 24. Doesn't mean they can't get there, but I think if it does, it sort of would speak to a really special season. Maybe not on par with last year, because last year was 13-0 and all that, but just because that the expectations are a little different this year.
I think the optimistic outlook for this year is the schedule allows them to work out the growing pains, get settled, get acclimated with 4 new offensive linemen around Poncho, with all the new guys in the secondary, figure out what your receiver depth chart is, get Dante Moore settled into being the starting quarterback and get him protecting the football and whatnot. And then they get to the tough game. And I agree. I don't know if I'll ever get to a point where I think Oregon wins that game at Penn State. They could. I just don't know if you said, hey, you got to put $50 on it, Spencer. I'd take Penn State for a number of reasons. But I think they can grow because you have your 2 non-conference games early on at home. Oklahoma State, Oregon State. Your road game is Northwestern. You start with an FCS school. Oregon should be able to roll out of bed and go 4-0 in any given year with that particular schedule. Now, if you're going to Stillwater or if you're going to Reser Stadium, I might feel differently. But alas, they're not. So I certainly think that's kind of the optimistic outlook of it is they don't have to be great right away to still have a really good year. They can kind of slow walk into their in-season development, kind of like they did with the offensive line a season ago, which I think could have a surprise on it. Where else may surprise players be? You're just going to have to stick around to find out. All right, Erik, I want one surprise player from you on the offensive side of the ball to watch during spring practice and in the spring game, and one on the defensive side of the ball. But I want to start with your thoughts on my surprise player on the offensive side. I don't think it is out of the realm of possibility that Janoris Wilson is the starting right tackle.
That was my guy. That was my answer. And I thought it was such a clever little sneaky answer. Were you scrubbing through Elijah Rushing's Twitter video as well recently?
I did do a lot of it is that time of year, Erik.
Well, I'm telling you, this is so funny. Sorry, just a brief tangent. Usually the media contingent that's boots on the ground in Eugene goes to practice and we have a sense of what's going on. In this world, in this spring, we were sitting around a laptop trying to scrub through Elijah Rushing's X post from like last week, trying to decide if it was Janoris Wilson or Emmanuel Pregnon at right tackle, because that sure as heck wasn't Alex Harkey or Kavika Rogers. So go ahead. Sorry.
I just think that, Wilson's trajectory is similar to that of Josh Connerly. Early in hit 1 year later, but Connerly was also a more developed prospect coming out of high school, so it makes sense. But he's going into his 3rd year. He's still around for some reason, right? Everybody's sticking around, and we'll see what happens in the spring portal window, but he's sticking around for some reason. And last year, he was the jumbo offensive lineman, which is exactly what Connerly did before he became the starting left tackle for 2 years. Now, Isaiah World is a starting left tackle, so he won't go there, but I don't think Janoris is someone that has to play on the left side of the offensive line.
Yeah, no, good analysis there. I think that's fair. I think the other part I will say is, and I probably fell prey to this. I think it was easy when they landed 3 portal players to just slide them all into starting spots. Like, oh, these guys were brought in. This is where they're going to land. Boom, boom, boom. While ignoring the fact that Janoris did play like 180 snaps on offense last year. You mentioned the 14J thing as the jumbo.
One of these. He got
high pointed.
Got one of those.
Gave a great press interview afterwards. Said he was doing it for all the big boys, which
I should have come out on my show that night when I did my reaction show, and my second segment should have been: is Janoris Wilson switching to tight end?
Hey, you know what? In a pinch,
Yeah, who knows?
No, I think that's the reason why it's funny, because that was gonna be my player as well, but we'll see how this all plays out. But I don't think it's at all unreasonable that we look up and go, okay, Pregnon and World, who were kind of a different tier of portal addition, I would say, from Harkey. You have to remember with Harkey, this was a guy who started at Colorado with the Dion stuff, didn't work out, ended up going JUCO, ended up at Texas State for a year, started. He's had 1 year of starting experience, whereas you're looking at World and Pregnon, who have, I think, 3 in World's case, 4 in Pregnon's case, maybe something like that. 3 or 4 years.
I think it was I can't remember if Pregnon started his first year at Wyoming. I know he started his second year and then started the last 2 years at USC.
Yeah, so these are guys who have a lot of experience. I think you feel comfortable there, but Janoris is definitely an ascending player, and I think you have to look at him, and I would certainly make the same kind of observation about Dave Iuli and Kavika Rogers as players who were coming along last year. And we all have kind of Matthew Bedford penciled in there at right guard. Good news, it sounds like if you were scrubbing through that video, you noticed next to Janoris Wilson was Matt Bedford. So
big dude, he's huge.
He's a big boy.
Big. He's a big. I want to see him and Terrence Green do an Oklahoma drill.
Terrence Green, one of my guys. Absolutely love that guy. Humongous. Absolute first.
Humongous.
Should be one of the first 3 guys off the bus. But my point is, like, I think along the offensive line in general, I think it's become easy to suggest it's going to be this guy or that guy. I think don't overlook the fact that some of these younger players, a Wilson or an Iuli or a Rogers, could emerge and maybe steal one of those jobs. If I'm going to have to think of another surprise, like, I'll just pick kind of an unsexy name and pick Gary Bryant, because his name's on my mind today after he was available for interviews and kind of outlined what happened last year, which was, I think we all knew it was kind of a weird thing. I was talking about this in our podcast earlier in the day. Like 2022-23, there was Byron Cardwell and Chris Hudson, who were big-time contributors from the previous season, expected to take a step, and then they didn't play and they transferred, right? A lot of people thought maybe that's the Gary Bryant story. He was their, one of their top receivers in 2023. What the heck is going on? Where is he in 2024? He's not even around. Like, is this the same kind of thing? Well, no, that was totally different circumstances. He was injured throughout the entirety of the season and is now better than ever, according to Dan. And so, like, I think it's been easy to sort of kind of go, well, I don't know where to put him. Like, Justice by the end of the season seemed to have been kind of ahead of him. Obviously, Evan was the whole way. You bring in DeCorian and Malik Benson, who are talented players from, obviously one from high school, one from another program. Like, Gary maybe doesn't have a role. And I think I came out of today going, like, I think we're overlooking him a little bit. That's not to say this is a player who maybe advances the ceiling of your receiver room, but probably was your best outside receiver blocker for most of 23. And certainly somebody who has a little bit of juice when he is healthy. So again, not a sexy name, but that would be one I would point to. And if I'm going to give a second, like, Jordan Davison is somebody who everybody seems to really like. That's a true freshman running back out of modern day. I'm talking spring. I just think spring game, it might be a ton of him. Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised a couple of, like, holy cow, that's a 225-pound kid that really moves, really has some juice to him and can make some things happen. So those would be a couple of names that I point out. I just think I came away from today with Gary being like, I think we kind of forgot about him a little bit. Again, I don't think he's going to be a star player, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of your 3 starting receivers and plays a big role this year.
Yeah, I think it's easy to forget that he was a borderline 5-star recruit coming out of high school himself, and he's going into his 6th year of college football. Now, I think that he's one of the guys that allows DeCorian Moore to be set up perfectly for success, because DeCorian doesn't have to do anything right away. Nothing's going to be put on his shoulders. It's, hey, if you're contributing, awesome. I expect him to some amount, but we don't need you to go out and be 1,000-yard receiver as a true freshman, which would be an Oregon freshman record. And I don't know if you've looked into this, by the way. I've been trying to see if there is a better season, but do you know who I believe, based on what I've been able to ascertain, holds the Oregon freshman receiving record.
I haven't looked into this at all. Trying to think back of who was involved early. Braylon Addison?
Nope. The best freshman season for an Oregon wideout I've been able to come across was a 700-yard campaign, like 705 yards, from Darren Carrington in 2014. He was a freshman that year. That's the best one. And that's why my expectations for DeCorian are that he contributes, but that he doesn't necessarily go out there and pull a Jeremiah Smith, because I don't know that the Oregon receiver room necessarily needs him to. I just think that whole dynamic is really interesting. I've talked about him a lot this offseason. I think he's going to be one of the most exciting players to watch going into the spring game. But I've not been able to track down anyone who's been better as a in his freshman year than Darren Carrington, and that's not someone I would have had at the top of my bingo card for that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look. I'll do some research.
Okay,
this.
do some digging. You might have better access to the archives in the Jedi Order than I do.
Well, because they do have a really I would say a pretty in-depth record book, but I don't know if they separate true freshmen from the pack. But yeah, I'll take a look at that.
Okay.
That's an interesting one. Okay.
Oh yeah, I'll get you out of here on this. A surprise player on defense to follow throughout spring football. Like we talked earlier with the secondary, I think you could go literally. There are over 10 players that you could say right now, way over 10.
How about Elijah Rushing?
That would be a surprise to me, because Oregon is so set at defensive end and edge.
Yeah, I'm just saying a guy who's got some juice.
Yeah,
who's got some juice, and I don't think that means necessarily. Like, I've heard it popularized that maybe Mateo slides inside a little bit more. I don't know if I like that ultimately in terms of
he's not a Jordan Birch kind of build. I could see Blake Purchase doing that. I don't know about Mateo.
But my point is, like, I still think, like, you think back to last year, and I was just looking through this, like, both the Marion, Winston, and Jaden Moore. Like, look at those guys' snap counts last year. There's room for there to be. And frankly, look at Blake Purchase the year before that. You know, in terms of there is room for somebody to emerge as a 250, 300 snap third outside linebacker, third edge, whatever you want to call it. And I just think that's an easy name for me, just because of the recruiting pedigree. And I think the need for someone to emerge in that group. Now, I still think, like, I think Mateo has a chance to set the school record in sacks this year. Like, I think that sort of thing is on the table.
Defoe's got to have the record, right?
I think it's Nick Reed.
Oh,
you're making me use my Google machine a lot. Yeah,
a throwback name if ever there was one.
Yeah, I got access to it real quick here. I'll pull it up. Let's see here. Defensive sack leaders of all time. Yeah, Nick Reed and Ernest Jones both had 13 sacks. Ernest Jones, somebody whose name genuinely, I think I've seen it looking at the record books. Do not remember. He played in 93. Nick Reed was 2008.
Mateo had 10.5 this past year, most in the Big Ten.
And 13 is this record for those two. So I think that's very much on the table. But I do think there's room for somebody like an Elijah to take a step forward. If we're going linebacker.
This is one of my favorite position groups, because I know at the top you're set. Betcher, Jackson, fourth-year guy, like thumbs up, across the board, no question marks there about what you're going to get. The next guy who's going to snap 400 to 500 times throughout the course of this 2025 year, I don't know.
I think Kamar Mathudi is a name I really like there, just based on the physical gifts.
Dylan Williams and Braden Platt are talented guys. Jerry Mixon's got an extra year on all of them. Like, this can go in so many directions.
Right. And so, and that's kind of where I'm at. I guess of those names, Kamar's the one that last year, just watching the very limited amount of practice and just seeing how he moves, stood out as the most advanced. There's been another year I haven't been at practice. It's possible Braden or Dylan looks considerably better. Maybe Gavin Nix is a guy who somehow is really ready to go.
True freshman.
Doesn't happen at Oregon. Yeah, good tape. But I think of those guys, I like Kamar. And I'm not even going to pick someone in the secondary, because that's hard, man. Like, I don't know.
That you could throw at a dartboard and have just as good a chance of picking who's going to be a surprise player in the secondary. But there are so many There's so many different names. That's why I'm stoked to watch the spring game as much as I ever have been on April 26th. 17 days away, Autzen Stadium. Get there. I believe, Eric, they're doing what they always do, which is free admission if you bring supplies for a canned food drive that they've got going on. So I definitely am stoked to watch them play, not just because content is easier, but because there are just a lot of different things to watch and a lot of different guys who could step up. I'll throw one name at you guys out there to end the show. One of my favorite tapes of this 25 class is Nasir Wyatt.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I mean, a freakishly fast athlete. I don't know if he's playing on the end line or if he's going back to the second level. We'll see. But that's a name defensively to keep your eye on as well. Erik Skopil of 24/7 Sports, the Autzen Audibles podcast. We'll end it there today. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.